How's it going, everybody? Welcome into the Skyline Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jack Hartman, joined as always by my good friend, my co-host from the West Coast, Nick Normand. We are here hopping on. This is we're doing a little doubleheader of recording for the sake of getting these done before the draft. And so we're just going to hop right into it. We are going through the NFC East and NFC North right now, talking about where each team sort of sits after free agency and what their top needs need to be. That need to be addressed in the draft. It doesn't necessarily need to be the top picks that they have in the draft, but they would be very foolish to not take a guy with any of their draft picks in these spots. And so we're going to start with the NFC East. And again, we're going in alphabetical order, not going in order of finish or anything like that. And so that means that first we have the Dallas Cowboys. And the Cowboys they've had a typical Cowboys offseason where they basically haven't done anything. They haven't spent that much, haven't done that much here. So let me get my screen shared here so that we can take a look and see some of the things that they're doing or that they have done. And this is this is interesting. This is a little outdated. As of yesterday, they traded for Joe Milton. So Joe Milton was the backup quarterback for the Patriots last year. Played in a couple games at the end of the season when the Patriots sort of shut down Drake May and showed great promise, and thought that he was definitely a guy that was open, that the Patriots might try to move to gain some draft capital. And they did, but I don't think any of us thought the Dallas Cowboys would be the team that would be calling the Patriots about Joe Milton. You'd think teams maybe like the Jets or the Steelers or some of these other teams that it's like, you have a quarterback, but what do you want to make sure that you've got some alternatives, right? Would be a team to do this, not a team like the Cowboys that have invested as much money as they have in Dak Prescott. So just another Jerry being Jerry and doing stuff that we're like, hey, you made a move, but also why? Like, might have been better off not. But anyway, some of the other things that they did this year, they traded for Kyer Elam, who we talked about quite a bit in the last couple episodes about what it looked like for him when he had to come in spots for the Bills last year. They signed Dante Fowler, Solomon Thomas, Robert Jones, Peyton Turner, Javonte Williams, Paris Campbell, Jack Sanborn, and Miles Sanders. They re-signed, I think Kevontae Turpin is really the only guy of the guys that they re-signed that's like, whoa, let's make sure that we talk about that. Probably the best special teams player in the league right now, at least best returner, right, would be the consensus there. So, Nick, these stupid Cowboys, right? Like, I just feel like that's all I can say about them. I think they'd certainly, it would make sense for them to draft a running back because they just keep trying to do this. Let's get old veterans and sign them to one-year deals and see what happens. And it just doesn't really work. It just doesn't. So I think running back would be something that they need to do. I think they certainly need to work on the defense after last year. It's especially interesting considering that as of right now, Micah Parsons does not have an extension signed. There's talk of is Dallas going to move on from him? And so if so, if that's what you're thinking, then you need to make a draft pick that shows don't worry, we're putting a plan in place. But yeah, Nick, what do you think about this Cowboys team and what their top needs need to be here?
They have a couple of emergencies, I think. They're one of the first teams right now that I think has some red alert emergencies that we've talked about. AFC teams, there are some like the Titans, obviously, with their quarterback situation, or the Texans with their overall offensive line. That's pretty red alert to me. But this Cowboys team, I just don't think you can go into a season with Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, and Deuce Vaughn as your running back core. Javonte Williams post-injury has not been the same dude. He hasn't been able to run with the same efficiency yards per carry wise since then. And he just hasn't shown the ability to be a bell cow since then whatsoever. I think that the other just alarm for me is at linebacker. Where at linebacker right now, Micah Parsons historically has done some linebacker things. But if you're putting him at linebacker, then you're depending on some really unreliable, you're putting in edge rushers that aren't very reliable as far as pass rush. And so I think that they want to keep Micah as a designated pass rusher as far as just keep him on the edge and just pressure the quarterback like hell. But because of the injury to DeMarvion Overshown, who had a really great single season last year, where it wasn't his rookie season necessarily because he tore his ACL his rookie season in the preseason. Last year was his first season, and he had a great season and then wrapped it up with another major injury, another torn ACL. And so a dude who coming out of college was seen as a really good linebacker prospect and then tore his ACL and then showed why he's really good and tore it again. Without having him, it's like, okay, Maris Leofau, he was drafted in the 3rd round last year, and they like him, but I don't know about an every down linebacker. Kenneth Murray, I don't think has proven to be an every down linebacker, nor Jack Sanborn. You don't have starting linebackers who can soak up the sheer number of snaps that you need unless you're playing Micah Parsons back there, in which case your whole defense is taking a step back. Mm-hmm. So I think linebacker is a massive, 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 massive need. I would also say that right guard, specifically Robert Jones, you just don't want to have in a starting role. And so I think that you could either plug in a guard there, draft a guard high. You could put Brock Hoffman in, who started last year for stretches, but he's not somebody who you want starting whatsoever as far as for a whole year either. And Tyler Guyton did not prove he was the guy at left tackle last year. He had really bad games and struggled really badly and wasn't able to hold on to a starting role as a rookie, even though he was a first-round pick. Yeah. So I think offensive line, as we've echoed many times over, is a massive need for basically every team. I think that defensive tackle I haven't even brought up. I think running back's a massive need. I think linebacker is a massive need. I think since they re-signed Oso Odighizuwa, I think that's less of a need, but I still think you need another defensive tackle. Mozzie Smith got better, but he looked like a bust as a rookie, and he looks like maybe a rotational guy last year. But you can't have one starter and one rotational guy as your defensive tackles. You need starters and rotational dudes, not one of each. And so that's another big need. So I think they have 3 or 4 needs that are all big. It's just running back might be a later one because you can draft running back in the 3rd or 4th and get a contributor. But
I'd like to see Dallas draft another offensive tackle and try moving Guyton to offensive guard. Okay. I think that could kind of be at least an attempt to kill 2 birds with one stone. Because obviously you don't want to go from, we used a 1st-round pick on this guy to, he's not starting on our offensive line like that quickly. That would be tough. That would be a hard pill to swallow. So I think that could be a way to draft offensive tackle, try moving Guyton to guard, and maybe address both of those positions in doing so. I totally agree with you with running back and linebacker. The Dallas Cowboys linebacking core just for the last few years has just been bad. Even the year, even 2 years ago when they won the division and got boat raced by the Packers in the playoffs, that linebacking core was it was small. They had guys playing linebacker who are the size of safeties and, in corners, the size of DBs. And so I think linebacker just, I think it's weird because of how nowadays it feels like the outside linebacker, the edge, is so much more important than a middle linebacker. But they need a guy. They need an Urlacher. They need a Kuechly. They need a dude that can play middle linebacker and can set the tone for that defense, and they just don't have it right now. So I agree with you. Running back, linebacker, and I would like to see them try drafting an offensive tackle and seeing what Guyton can do at guard to help out there. So moving on to the New York Giants, the New York Football Giants. They have done some interesting stuff. Feels like I keep saying about literally every single team that we talk about. But with them, the interesting stuff that they've done are related to quarterback, which makes it super fun to talk about. So they have signed Jameis Winston. They signed him first to a 2-year, $8 million deal. A backup deal. They, definitely was clear, like, we're signing you as our backup for the next couple of years. Then they signed Russell Wilson to a 1-year deal up to $10.5 million. And before that happened, we were basically all thinking, like, okay, well, they're going to draft Shedeur Sanders at pick number 3 if the Browns don't. Then that happens, and it makes you start to think. It makes you start to wonder. Also, the Colorado Pro Day was yesterday, as of us recording this. It wasn't until a very late edition that Brian Daboll was even attending the Pro Day, which, if you ask me, if you're thinking about drafting a quarterback, but your head coach isn't going, I think that says a lot about if you're actually really thinking about drafting that quarterback at that pick. So interesting. We'll see sort of how that plays out. But they signed Jameis and Russell Wilson. They re-sign Tommy DeVito to a 1-year deal, to keep him around. But then outside of that, they did some interesting things, some things that I really like. I really like the Javon Holland signing for them. Definitely probably the top free agent safety that was available. And so that's a really, really good get for them, because I feel like the Giants more than any of the teams drafting in the top 5, were like, honestly, pretty much everything can get better, right? Like, the Titans might be in that same boat. Though we talked in the last episode about, we actually kind of liked what they had done with offensive line lately. But yeah, it was like, okay, they have Malik Neighbors, everything else could get upgraded, right? And so, checking off safety by signing Javon Holland, I really, really liked. But yeah, so when I look at this Giants team, I think that again, offensive line, right? All of these, we can just say offensive line. Potentially running back for them. I liked what the rookie, the kid, I think he was out of Purdue. Tyrone Tracy. I really liked what they had from him last year, but still, like, you could use another running back to help there. Definitely, another wide receiver to pair with Malik Neighbors. Sorry, Lil Jordan Humphrey and Zach Pascal. Like, that's not what your guys' skill set is. Also on the defensive side, could use probably a linebacker. Definitely some more DBs. So Nick, sort of where are you at with this team?
As we've said many times over, I think offensive line's a massive need for so many of these teams. Evan Neal has been a massive bust up to this point in his career, and they've contemplated, I heard reports, moving him to guard. I don't know that he's going to be much better there since he's so tall. He's like 6'7" or something like that. Just a massive human being as far as height, weight, speed. And I just don't know if you want to have somebody that tall that you plug right in there, who's, I thought, was a super athlete coming out as far as offensive line goes. But I just think that offensive line, you got to figure out how to produce good offensive line play year over year. And they've had 1 year out of the last 10, it feels like, of good offensive line play. And so I think offensive line's a massive need. Quarterback, I don't know if they're going to go with a quarterback in the draft. As we've talked about, I'm pretty confused about what direction they're going. The reports today are that potentially the Browns are going to move forward, potentially targeting Travis Hunter with the number 2 pick. And I think them targeting Hunter with the number 2 pick actually throws a massive wrench potentially into the Giants' plans, where it seemed like the overarching feeling was, okay, Jameis gets signed to the Giants. Okay, that's cool. They can still go quarterback. Okay, Russell Wilson gets signed to the Giants. Okay, do they really want to have 3 quarterbacks on their roster who have starting experience and then draft Shedeur Sanders? And so I don't know if Shedeur is necessarily the play. But Abdul Carter, I don't know that you want to go with Abdul Carter when he would probably be your third edge rusher behind Burns and behind Thibodeau,
Yeah.
where he's probably better than Thibodeau right now, probably. But Burns is really good. And do you really want to have that big of an investment where not all three of them are going to be on the field at the same time?
Yep.
And so that just kind of raises a question for me that you kind of posed to me earlier of, do the Giants then want to trade out of that pick? Would somebody want to trade out or trade up in the draft and get Carter? I think that could be on the table. But I think I had a couple of other holes that I wanted to bring up. I just think also that the Javon Holland signing is more filling in a need where they let go of Xavier McKinney last year when he went to the Packers and was great for the Packers. And it felt like, wait, you're the Giants. You know that he's a great player. Why don't you keep him? And then they were without him for a year and saw him be a star with the Packers. And it's like, wait, we want a good safety. I guess we're going to get it as well. And so it feels more like getting a replacement for a dude that was gone for a year. But Tyron Tracy, he stepped in and was solid at running back. Malik Neighbors, obviously a superstar in the making, but could add something to that receiver room, add something to that offensive line that's just been a disaster year over year. The defense is pretty good. I think they could add some stuff there just because of best player available type stuff. And I'm curious about this quarterback situation if Shedeur is still on the table for them, because it seems like the average Joes like you or I would say, no, they're not going to go with Shedeur. But the Giants aren't a very well-run team, and I don't know if they're going to make what we think's the right decision. And I'm not even saying that we know better than them, because we definitely don't. We're not in the football business like that. And maybe, though, they're going to make a decision that makes us look like fools, and we think they're clowns for doing. But who knows?
Yeah. I think something also to mention with the Giants when it comes to quarterbacks is they have historically been a team that only has two quarterbacks on their active roster. Sometimes they've had a third, but not always. And so you just signed Tommy DeVito to a 1-year deal on top of re-signed him on top of having Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson. And so if you draft Shedeur Sanders, then you're either paying Tommy DeVito re-signed to an active roster money to be on your practice squad, or you're kicking somebody else to the practice squad, or you're doing something that you've never done historically, which is have 4 quarterbacks on your active roster. And so that's also something that I haven't heard a single person talk about, but is part of the reason why I also sort of lean I don't think Giants are going to take Shedeur Sanders. But being at pick 3, I think that's way too high to draft Will Campbell, right? We're talking about offensive line needs, because personally I think pick 4 with the Patriots is too high to draft Will Campbell also. That would be forcing a square peg into a round hole sort of situation, I think, with him at that spot, not him on those teams, but with him that being drafted that high. So I think if the Browns take Travis Hunter, then I think we could see the Giants trade out of the spot. And I think we've talked about okay, well, if you're in, say, pick, 8 to 15, it's you're potentially trading, we want to trade out. And it's okay, well, nobody might want to trade up. There might not be a guy that's there that's oh, well, this guy's worth trading up for. But you're the Giants at pick 3 and Abdul Carter is sitting there, that will entice some phone calls. But yeah, I feel like this is a team that it's really any draft pick that they use on pretty much any position is going to be a benefit. Except, as crazy as this sounds, except maybe quarterback. Genuinely, you have guys that have starting experience and can play quarterback for your team. You don't have your guy that is this is our quarterback of the future. I don't think you go and you sign Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston and re-sign Tommy DeVito if you view Shedeur Sanders as a guy that could be the quarterback of your future. I just don't think you do that. And so I think they might be in hey, we're waiting until next year to see what quarterback draft class looks like. Drew Aller, Garrett Nussmeier are the two first ones that come to mind that are definitely coming out. People want to make it seem like Arch Manning is leaving, but honestly, like I think he's going to stay all 4 years. Eli didn't go out early. Peyton Manning didn't go out early. So just something to note there. All right, moving on to the Philadelphia Eagles. Fly, Eagles, fly. They just won the Super Bowl. And so I think their top three needs are any defender that has played for the Georgia Bulldogs. Because that's just what they do. Seriously, it's what they do. They traded Kenny Pickett to the Browns. They re-signed Zach Bond, which was really, really big for them. They extended Saquon Barkley and gave him a deal that I think he absolutely deserves. They released Darius Slay and James Bradbury, but that comes on the heels of Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean having tremendous rookie seasons, as well as signing Adoree Jackson to play corner. They signed A.J. Dillon. Y'all, I love A.J. Dillon. Like, I love watching A.J. Dillon. I think, honestly, like, even though they signed Azeez Ojulari and Joshua Uche, I'd love to see them draft an edge. There's going to be edges available at pick 32 that at one point or another had like people were projecting in the top 10 because it feels like there are a lot of edges that were like that this year. And so, you know, they might be a James Pierce landing spot. They might be a spot for the, oh my gosh, I'm blanking. The kid from Alabama who tore his labrum and is oh no, he might be a linebacker actually. Jahad Campbell. So he's not an edge linebacker, but still, that might be they might sweep in and take him. But yeah, this is honestly, this is an Eagles team that like genuinely anything that they're drafting in this draft is just like the rich getting richer. Like seriously, they are so solid, so well rounded. I guess maybe you could say, hey, get another wide receiver to be that wide receiver 3, maybe, right? That might be something that you could be like, no, you should do that, or get a third running back, you know, behind Saquon and A.J. Dillon. But like, yeah, like I don't know. I don't see like a gaping hole on this team that we've pretty much seen on every other team that we've gone through so far, and probably and will see on all of the rest. Like even the team that they played in the Super Bowl last year, the Chiefs, it was like, okay, well, offensive line, you know, they're the second best team in the league this year, but still they have an offensive line issue, right? Like, you know, I don't see the like glaring aspect that they need to take care of here.
When I look at this, like there are just reports that have came out that I'm really curious about. Were the reports of them wanting to trade Dallas Goedert? I'm like, does that open up tight end as being a position of need? Because Goddard's good. He's been injury prone in the last couple of years, but he's been really good. I think that tight end, I guess, would open up there. And this is a tight end rich draft. So I think tight end could definitely be a pick for them at some point. I'm curious about the guard position that was vacated by Mekhi Becton that they traded for Kenyon Green, it seems like, to fill into that spot. Because Kenyon Green, as I said, was a bust. But Kenyon Green was a bust not with this Eagles coaching staff, with this O-line coach, you know, where this offensive line coach is the best offensive line coach in the game. And I think that he could easily coach up Green to have a really good season, as he did Becton last year, where Becton was a historically very, very, very injured player, where he was obviously an athletic freak considering his size, where he was 350 plus pounds and like 6'9", just massive dude. But he was that massive dude who seems like every other year messed up his knee, missed 12, 13, 14 games, never kind of lived up to the hype. And then he put it all together and was the healthiest offensive line on the Eagles last year. When Juergens was going out with injury, when their other offensive lineman, their other guard who's really, really good, who was out of Alabama, also went out with injury. And it's like, wow, why is Mekhi Becton their really healthy, really good offensive lineman right now? And I'm curious if Kenyon Green could kind of resuscitate his career there. I think that as you said, there aren't just a lot of massive holes on this team. I agree with edge rusher, but when I look at it, I think Azeez Ojulari is a good pickup. I think Josh Uche is a good pickup.
Yeah.
Because of who they are and how they are as the Philadelphia Bulldogs, I think that if Jalen Walker fell, or if the other edge rusher, who's just an athletic, Michael Williams, if he fell as well, where he's an athletic freak, but he wasn't very good in college as far as his tape. I'm curious if they'd pick up those athletic freaks, but not very good as far as on the field production kind of dudes. Because I don't know if they're necessarily Eagles dudes, but they are Georgia defenders. And so that, I think, necessitates them being Eagles dudes. Yep. So I'm curious about them as fits there. Besides that,
I would also slot in.
Yeah, wide receiver 3 was a great shout by you.
Yeah, I'd also slot in potentially Malachi Starks, who Georgia guy, safety. They just traded C.J. Gardner-Johnson. I think if he's sitting there, the Eagles are very quickly running the card up and not letting ESPN and the NFL get that last 10 minutes of airtime before that last pick of the draft. So, I mean, the Eagles are just good, man, and they just have a really, really good roster. So, moving on to the Washington Commanders, one of the things that I think is really, really interesting about them is they made some significant moves here this offseason. But one thing to kind of mention is they're a really old team. And so despite getting a lot of guys that have NFL experience, I wouldn't hate them even drafting some of these positions that they signed or traded for just so that they can have some younger guys, some young bulls in the room. So, looking at this, they signed Javon Kinlaw, Jonathan Jones, Dietrich Wise, Jacob Martin, Will Harris, I missed him, Nate Herbig, Michael Gallup, Foster Sarrell, then traded for Laramie Tunzel and traded for Deebo Samuel. I like all of the I guess I don't like all of those moves, but for the most part, I like a lot of those moves. I think a lot of those moves make, are improvements to the starting rotation, as well as some, the guys they re-signed. They re-signed Bobby Wagner. They re-signed Marcus Mariota. They re-signed Zach Ertz, right? But the team is very old, and so I think if you're Washington, you brought in a lot of guys that you're like, listen, if these guys stay healthy and play all year, then we significantly improve this roster. But that's a pretty big if. So if I'm Washington, I'm thinking wide receiver, right? I'm thinking let's get a guy because, how likely is it that Deebo Samuel is going to last all year, right? Let's get an offensive tackle, because Laramie Tunzel is old. Let's get a defensive back because they traded for Marshawn Lattimore at the trade deadline last year, and he's old and injury prone. So when I look at Washington, I think this one's pretty simple, and it's like you've done the work, like the groundwork of really improving your roster and improving your guys that are starting, but let's draft their replacements, right? Instead of this being the Steelers being like, maybe we should take a defensive tackle because Cam Hayward's getting old. It's like, we should draft this position and this position and this position and this position because all of our starters right now are seasoned veterans that bring a lot of great leadership and veteran experience, but also are guys that we're going to need to replace soon, whether because we signed them to a one-year deal or because they're old and injury prone.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you with all of this, Jack, where I look at this and I'm like, okay, this is Jaden Daniels' team. That's just like point blank where we're at with it, where it's Jaden Daniels and his crew of dudes. Every defender that's good, it's like, okay, they might be head of the defense with Bobby Wagner being the seasoned veteran leader of the defense. But this is Jaden Daniels' team. They go as far as he takes them. And I think every other player on the whole roster essentially is replaceable. Where I think Jaden Daniels, you aren't drafting a quarterback. You're just not investing in that sort of way because you have the guy. But I think you can draft every single other position. Whereas Brian Robinson Jr.'s seat a little warm. It's not that he's on the hot seat, but you could definitely draft a running back. Terry McLaurin's really good, but Debo Samuel's old. Noah Brown, not somebody who you want to be having playing for you late into the season, a bunch of snaps. Easily, you could draft a receiver there. Zach Ertz, old, not injury prone, but just older and kind of up and down in these last couple of years because of the age. Definitely could draft that. All of the offensive line, none of their spots, I think, outside of Tunsil. Tunsil's going to start this year. But if you draft an offensive tackle, you plug him in at right tackle, move him to left tackle when Tunsil hangs him up. I think the guard positions, I don't think they're drafting center because this isn't a very good center draft.
Yeah.
But even on the defense, it's like edge rushing position, disaster. Defensive tackles, Deron Payne and question marks. Linebackers, Bobby Wagner. You can draft a linebacker even though Bobby Wagner's there. Frankie Louvu's good, but you add another linebacker in there. All these corner positions, another safety to go with Quan Martin. I just think that every position is on the table, every single one. So
Yep. Yeah. So that's Washington, short and sweet. But going through the NFC East, just quick overview with Dallas. We said running back, linebacker, and then offensive line, whether they draft a guard or draft a tackle and maybe move Guyton to guard. Either way there. With the Giants, we said that the biggest glaring need was offensive line, but they're in a spot similar to Washington, but for a very different reason of, pretty much anywhere that you draft is gonna improve this team, is gonna help that team. Philadelphia, we said tight end. If they trade Dallas Goedert and guard because you lost Mekhi Becton, but they're just so rich with talent that it's like we're really grasping at straws to, when your top priority is something that you need if you trade a guy that you already have on your roster, like it just goes to show how good of a situation you're in. And with Washington, we didn't even really say positions, just get younger. Just draft guys that are younger at positions that you have old seasoned veterans at. And so let's move on to the NFC North,
yes.
a division that I feel quite strongly about. We're going to start, again, going in alphabetical order, so starting with the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears, the biggest thing that they did this offseason is they hired Ben Johnson as their new head coach. That'll be, I think, really, really good for the development of Caleb Williams, or at least that'll be the truest way to show, all right, what do you have, right? What do you have in Caleb Williams by having him there? But they traded for Jonah Jackson and Joe Thuney. I think those are the two biggest things that are the real things to mention, as well as signing Drew Dahlman at center, like basically really investing heavily in this offensive line. And I think that'll be good for Caleb Williams' development because one, he'll have more time. And two, that'll be good because hopefully that'll help you be able to coach out of him, like, hey, you're leaving the pocket too quick. Hey, you're getting scared of what's coming at you too quick. Like, relax. You have time. We built you an offensive line so you can have time and so you can truly examine the field and develop that part of your game. Because as we know, he's probably a top 5 quarterback in the NFL already when it's time to improvise. He's just that's his skill set and the bulk of his skill set. But okay, can you play in time and can you play in rhythm? I think this will really, really help his development there. So that being said, I look at the Chicago Bears team and I'm like, running back, absolutely. I like DeAndre Swift. He's good, but if the Raiders don't take Genty and you're sitting there at 10 and Genty's there, I don't know how you don't take him there. I think maybe another wide receiver, Keenan Allen, is no longer there, and so that could be helpful. And then I think it's some defensive positions that it's like, hey, let's just get better, right? Let's get bigger and let's get better over there. I like their addition of Grady Jarrett, and I like their addition of Dio Odeyingbo. But the on the defensive side, especially the trenches, that's always a spot that you can you can build and have rotational guys in. And I don't want to act like you shouldn't draft an offensive lineman either, because again, like you don't want Jonah Jackson to get hurt and it's like, we don't have anybody to play guard. So that's sort of my thoughts with the Bears. Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I have a couple of other positions that just kind of jump out to me. Darnell Wright's a good tackle, and they redid their whole interior. But Braxton Jones is kind of replaceable at offensive tackle. And so I think you definitely could go left tackle, specifically left tackle in this draft. If the board fell right, I think to upgrade that position and make your offensive line upper tier potentially, depending on coaching, would be a really big thing you could get at. Because right now, if your offensive line's really good, except for left tackle, that could be your downfall at the end of the day. When I look at this defense, I think Montez Sweat and Grady Jarrett kind of fall into the bucket of the Chris Jones older interior dude, and then their young defensive end in Karlaftis, very similar to Montez Sweat as far as their tier they're in. And so I feel like you kind of have those dudes, and then question marks as far as the other pass rushers in terms of interior and exterior pass rushers. Mm-hmm. I think that Dexter and Odeyingbo and Austin Booker offer more of that pass rush upside than people on the Chiefs do, but I still think that it's a need as far as interior, exterior pass rush for them.
Yeah.
I think the defense outside of that's pretty good. I think the secondary is pretty darn good. Maybe a replacement for Kevin Byard because he's older. But besides that, I think that the holes are kind of small for this team.
Yeah. The Bears have done a really, really good job. Ryan Poles has done a really, really good job in the last 2 years in particular that he's been there of, all right, let's turn this thing around. Let's give our team a roster that it's at least like, hey, we've got dudes that play football, and not guys that are there to fill needs, which I think is really, really big for the Chicago Bears. Moving on to my Detroit Lions. I obviously will have way more to say. So Nick, I'll let you talk first.
Sure. And it's completely on the table that like I say stuff and you're just like, well, I see things very differently because you're obviously very plugged into this team compared to me.
Yeah.
I think that Kevin Zeitler's leaving. It says that the person filling in that spot is named Kaode Awusika. I have not heard of him. Christian Mahogany's behind him. He was kind of solid, didn't really get starting time last year. But I think that right guard to keep that level of offensive line play really high with this team, I think that they could easily go right guard there, invest in it high, and just keep a badass offensive line intact. Yep. I think that maybe later in the draft, a kind of third or fourth receiver. Tim Patrick's good, but he's been injury prone historically. He's on the older side. Just somebody to be able to take the pressure off of Amon-Ra and J-Mo. So I think that that's something, not an urgent need and probably not one of the top 3 needs, but just something I'll give a shout to. I think that edge rusher opposite Aiden Hutchinson's obviously a big need. That they traded for Zadarius Smith last year and they released him and they could still possibly re-sign him. But I think due to Aiden Hutchinson's injury and due to Smith not being re-signed as of now, that they could easily go edge rusher. They had injuries at defensive tackle. I'm not worried about that as much. I think that corner is still massively in play for them. DJ Reed was a really good pickup, but Terrion Arnold was not playable last year, as you said to me many times. Ennis Rakestraw, I didn't really see any positive play out of him. I didn't see a lot of negative play necessarily, but I just didn't notice him on the field in a positive way. Rock Ya-Sin historically has shown flashes of being all right as a rotational corner. And Amik Robertson had a pretty good year for the Raiders. But I think they just need to get more quality guys who can play as far as corners at every level outside of their safeties of Branch and Joseph are really, really good.
Yep.
But I just don't think they want to be bleeding out of the corner position as they have the last year or two, where they're just bleeding yards and yards and yards and struggling with tackling, struggling with covering guys. And so I think corner, edge rusher, specifically that right guard positions where I kind of lean.
Yeah, those are the top 3 needs, right? Losing Zeitler, you got to replace him. And there's experience with the guys that they've got sitting there, but still that would be like a great thing to do. Edge rusher for sure. It's sad that we didn't really get to see Zadarius Smith and Aiden Hutchinson playing together. I think that would have made Zadarius Smith this a lot better. But he is not. He's just not the caliber of a number one pass rusher, number one edge rusher. And so because he was after the Lions traded for him, he was good. I think he still got 4 or 5 sacks after the trade, but still not your game wrecker pass rusher. It's really, really hard when you look at this team because so much of it is like just to get healthy, right? Like I genuinely think if the Lions were 100% healthy, not even 100%, if they were 90% healthy come the playoffs, it would have been very, very interesting to see what happened. I think if they were 90% healthy, that they would have beaten Washington. They would have at least made it a lot more challenging for Washington to walk all the way down the field every possession like it seemed like they did. And I think if they were that healthy, like the Lions roster last year stacked up against the Eagles roster last year, like I'm not going to say that the Lions were far and away better, but I think there was definitely, you could make an argument for either. And so it's really, really hard to look and be like, no, we need to improve here and here and here based on last year, because it's like, well, we were so hurt, especially on the defensive side of the ball. That being said, interior offensive linemen, specifically get somebody to play right guard, edge, and corner are absolutely the top 3. I would love for the Lions to, with their first round pick, if they use it on either of these 3 guys, I will call it a success. If you're leaning right guard with the first round pick and Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State is there, run that card in. I love him. If you're leaning edge there and Donovan Ezraku is there, I really, really like him, especially as part of this defense. I really, really like him as part of this defense. He's a Dan Campbell edge, and he does really, really well there. And then if you're leaning corner, there was like a lot of buzz and then it really, really calmed down on Maxwell Hairston out of Kentucky.
Yep.
But I think you could potentially draft edge in round 1 and then try to move up in round 2 and be able to get Hairston, who I love out of Kentucky. Whoever ends up drafting Maxwell Hairston is going to get a dude. He's a really, really solid player. I love what the Lions did in free agency. Obviously, Carlton Davis became a really, really special place in the heart of Lions fans. But you got DJ Reed for cheaper than the Patriots are paying Carlton Davis. And so I like that a lot. I really, really like retaining Tim Patrick. He was really, really awesome as a wide receiver 3 last year. Though I agree with you, wouldn't hurt to, in a deep wide receiver, not super deep, but deep enough wide receiver class to draft a wide receiver on a day 3, maybe just to have another guy there. Re-signing Dan Skipper was a must, not because he's your every down tackle, but just the locker room. Like he is a leader. He's experienced. He's a great veteran. And with the number of times that they use extra offensive linemen, it's not good enough for the Lions to have a starting 5 offensive linemen. You need a starting 8 because of how much, how many times they bring in jumbo packages. So holding on to him was really, really good. Re-signing Derek Barnes, Levi Onwuzurike, and Marcus Davenport, all moves that I like, especially for the time and price. Davenport for 1 year, about $5 million, and Onwuzurike for 1 year, $5.5 million, I think are really, really good deals for them. And like those a lot. So it's so tough because it was like, man, there was so much left to be desired last year, and really the injury bug is what kept us from really getting to see it. But if the Lions get healthy, if they address those three positions, then this team is going to be really, really good again this year. So they're my team. So obviously I'm biased, but that's the way I look at this Detroit Lions team. Nick, you have any final thoughts about them?
I just like that the Lions are getting their glue guys for good deals, where Tim Patrick, Dan Skipper, Craig Reynolds, those are all glue dudes. Tim
Yeah.
Patrick, the tough over the middle, the blocking, like he's that kind of glue dude. Dan Skipper, definition of a glue dude. Craig Reynolds, his down the field blocking and physicality as a third running back in that system, as a blocking running back. He's a glue dude. Those are glue dudes who you want to keep around to keep your culture intact, to keep your football playing ability, where I think the Lions will draft some dudes where they might not be the best athletes, might not be the fastest, biggest, strongest, but they get a lot of football players in there. And they like to have that mindset of physical football players in that locker room, it seems like. And they retained those dudes. And so I don't think those are additions, but I think that's retaining something so it's not a subtraction. But I think that they could definitely use some explosiveness off the edge, some ability to cover, and some athleticism there. Because those are some athletic things that, like, you can be a glue dude, but a glue dude doesn't mean that you can cover the number one receiver on another team. A glue dude doesn't mean that you're able to get pressure in 2 seconds on the opposing quarterback opposite 100%. Of Hutchinson. You need athleticism, and I think that's kind of where the Lions are leaning in some of these spots.
Yep, absolutely. Moving on to the Green Bay Packers.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the smallest little section yet when we see of moves that were made by them. But they signed guard Aaron Banks, they signed corner Nate Hobbs, they signed wide receiver Mecole Hardman, and they signed linebacker Christian Welch, and re-signed Brandon McManus and Isaiah McDuffie. The Green Bay Packers, I feel like, are a weird study because part of the thing that when the Packers are at their best, they look like seriously a top team in the NFC. And when they aren't at their best, it's like, okay, this team has some glaring needs. But it feels like the difference between them being at their best and not at their best is on the shoulders of consistency from Jordan Love, which makes it hard to look at and be like, oh, well, these are, unlike a team like Houston, right, that, we've seen that are honestly similar tracks in terms of at their best, not at their best, good quarterback play, not good quarterback play. But with Houston, it's like, well, you get good quarterback play when you keep CJ Stroud's butt off the ground. Green Bay, it's a little bit different. So, Nick, what are your sort of thoughts about the Green Bay Packers and where they need to go?
I think the Green Bay Packers are kind of similar to the Houston Texans that we talked about on our previous episode, where it seems like to me that Jordan Love kind of overexceeded expectations, or at least CJ Stroud did. And they have this deep sort of wide receiver core with Reed and Dobbs and Watson and Wicks and Melton and Mecole Hardman added into the mix, where it seems like this Packers team has a wealth of running back or receivers, but it's got a wealth of receivers and they all have some sort of injury problems. Christian Watson can never seem to stay consistent nor healthy. Romeo Dobbs has been healthier, but even is a little injured right now. And Jaden Reed has had a couple of little injuries in his career, where it seems kind of similar to the Texans and like, wow, this is a really good receiver core if all of them are healthy. But I think offensive tackle is a pretty big need, where Rasheed Walker, he was drafted late out of Penn State. And Zach Tom was drafted. I don't even know that he was drafted. But last year they drafted Jordan Morgan out. Okay, Zach Tom was drafted in the 4th round back in 2022. But they drafted Jordan Morgan last year in the 1st round out of Arizona to play tackle, and he's slated right now to be their backup guard. When you draft an offensive tackle in the 1st round, you draft them to play offensive tackle and to start in the 1st round.
And likely left tackle.
And likely left tackle, because you need left tackles. You need a blind side protector who is able to keep your quarterback upright and keep them able to make their reads and be able to dissect the defense. And I just think Zach Tom has had a bunch of playing experience. Rasheed Walker has had playing experience. but I don't think you want replaceable playing experience dudes, especially around a quarterback that's still young, still only has 2-ish years of experience, that had injury issues last year, taking a major hit leading to a knee injury against the Eagles in week 1. You need to keep your investment, your young investment, upright to be able to learn and develop, to be able to protect himself. And it seems like their investment with Jordan Morgan last year didn't work out, and that you need to figure out that tackle situation. I think that on the defense that they could go corner pretty easily, where they had their corner who was a speed threat, what was his name? He went to the Raiders, who was I had his name. But Jair Alexander is older, and there have been trade rumors about him for a while. And on top of that, your second corner, it looks like you got Carrington Valentine, who's had playing time, and Keyshawn Nixon, who's had playing time, and Nate Hobbs, who's going to be more of a slot kind of player. But why is it that you have all these dudes when you haven't been able to get a bunch of dudes who are able to stay on the field and play consistently from this year onward? You need a Jair Alexander replacement pretty soon. It seems like the trade's been kind of imminent and not happened yet. And I don't really feel like there are a bunch of glaring holes, but I think that figure out offensive tackle, figure out the kind of injury weird stuff going on with your receiving core. And then you kind of got to have players play up to their draft position. With Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa, you need him to start playing like a first-round pick, and he has the kind of athletic tools to be able to do that. But I think corner probably to be able to take over for Alexander, offensive tackle, and then you can kind of pick your poison with a couple of these other spots. But those are the two that stand out to me.
Yeah, I'd say wide receiver would be what I would put as that third spot because, because of Christian Watson's inconsistency, I don't look at the Packers, as a Lions fan who plays them twice a year, and we're also playing Minnesota, right? Who it's like, okay, Justin Jefferson is scary, right? We're playing Chicago, and it's like, okay, Rome Odunze has the talent, has the ability, especially if Caleb Williams is going to have time to throw. Rome Odunze is scary, right? I don't view a receiver on the Packers like that. And I mean, that's what happens when the Packers never take a wide receiver in the first round. But, they're drafting in a place that, it might be time to finally break that, right? Break that trend and draft in Emeka Egbuka, or, Matthew Golden if he's there, depending on which wide receivers are sitting there around you. So let's move on to the Minnesota Vikings. Obviously the biggest question mark for them hasn't even been about what they've actually done, but it's just, okay, so Sam Darnold is gone, which means we're kind of moving all steam ahead with J.J. McCarthy, but also we have no idea what J.J. McCarthy is going to look like. So let's, we'll see what happens, but I think they did a good job in the other places of doing what they had to do. They re-sign Aaron Jones. They re-sign Byron Murphy Jr. They re-signed Harrison Smith. Harrison Smith, I think, really, really good example of that glue guy for Minnesota, like we were talking about with Detroit. Though I do think he still has a little bit higher of a ceiling. Though he's getting old, man. Props to him for doing what he's doing and still doing what he's doing it this far in. They traded Ed Ingram, but signed Will Fries to a 5-year, $88 million deal. Certainly an upgrade there. They signed Jonathan Allen to a 3-year deal. They signed Ryan Kelly to a 2-year deal, Isaiah Rodgers 2 years, Javon Hargrave 2 years, Jeff Okudah to a 1-year deal, and Tavier Thomas to a 1-year deal, as well as signing Rondale Moore, who showed a lot of promise coming out of Purdue when he did come out of Purdue a few years back. They traded for Jordan Mason, which I think most people were surprised that Jordan Mason was available for trade. You'd think with San Francisco, you'd think with San Francisco being like having Christian McCaffrey, who is so injury prone, that San Francisco would be quick to hold on to Jordan Mason, but they trade for him. So I feel like Minnesota did a really, really good job this offseason. I think maybe of the like teams that are like, okay, you're like almost a contender, right? You're going to have a record as if you're a contender, but like, do you have the roster to go and contend come the playoffs? I think of those teams that sort of fit into that category, Minnesota did the best this offseason of like, no, we're going to go and we're going to improve and we're going to get the guys that we need so that we can not just be a team that has a record that looks like a contender, but then come the playoff time, you're not going to want to face us. And so props to them for doing what they did. What would you say are still the big things that they should address here in the draft, though?
I think the reason that they gave Byron Murphy Jr. a massive contract is because they got to figure out their corner position outside of him as far as starting caliber dudes. I think that Byron Murphy Jr. played really well last year and that you kind of need somebody to go with him because corners can only do so much. You can only cover one dude or you can only cover one zone as a corner. And so a corner to kind of go with him, I think, is a need.
Yeah.
I would also sneaky a big need for the Vikings. This is going to come off sounding funny considering all the reporting that's gone on. I think that quarterback's a really big need solely because J.J. McCarthy is the only one on the roster right now. And J.J. McCarthy being the only one on the roster and coming off of an injury is just kind of puzzling. Where it's like, you got to add somebody. And especially like a veteran to be able to teach your young quarterback would be a big, big thing where I think it's one of the bigger needs that probably should be addressed in free agency still, and it still isn't, where a Tyrod Taylor, Jacoby Brissett type. I don't believe either of those dudes are available, but that sort of veteran, steady, be able to kind of talk it through with your young quarterback. He's just got nobody. It's a dude rehabbing a messed up knee by himself who's a kid, man. That will be really tough to be toss the car keys being like, this is your team and have no support system as far as other players to be able to show you how you've been there, done that. When the previous veteran for him was Sam Darnold, who had a really good season into a disaster last couple of weeks, it just seems like he probably hasn't been set up for success as far as the leadership in front of him and in that kind of room, I would say. Outside of that, maybe like a third receiver to go with Addison and Jefferson will be interesting. Yeah, I think that they're in a pretty good spot. Maybe, yeah. I would just kind of wrap it with that on my end. What I'm thinking.
Yeah, I like quarterback and I like corner. I honestly, I would like to see I'd like to see them quarterback wise, maybe draft Dylan Gabriel. I think he and JJ McCarthy have some similar attributes. Obviously, throw with different hands. But still, like not big towering over you type quarterbacks, size wise. Did really, really good at doing what they were asked to do in college for both of them. So I think if they're looking to draft a backup quarterback, I think Gabriel would be probably the guy that I would lean with for best option for them. But yeah, so running through it real quick, the NFC North, Chicago, we put left tackle is like really big, and they everything else that's similar to Washington, as we talked about earlier. Anything is gonna help you improve or at least give you depth. But in terms of like, hey, this needs to get addressed, it's left tackle. With Detroit, we said an interior offensive lineman who will play right guard at least to start, an edge, corner. With Green Bay, offensive tackle, corner, and wide receiver. And with Minnesota, corner and quarterback, which I think they're the first team that we have said quarterback who has a starting quarterback, which is interesting. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up for this one. Next week, we will be finishing up the NFC with the NFC West and the NFC South. And yeah, just inching closer and closer to draft time. It's going to be a great one. So enjoy this. Thanks for watching. Go back and listen to our last couple episodes to hear us cover the entirety of the AFC, doing the same thing in the same format. But until next time, have a good one, everybody.